everyone. This is Chapter 10, Medical Law and Ethics. And the chapter is, let me just make the full chapter, Patient Confidentiality and HIPAA. This is for week 9. We have been dealing with this for weeks, and we've talked about it in our written assignment that you guys had to do, pick a HIPAA violation. I had some outstanding papers. And I'll refer them to those in a little bit. Let's get started. About confidentiality, I believe we know right now that the physicians and all of us are expected to maintain patient confidentiality at all times. There are some areas in where it can be lightened up and some information can be given. I'll get to those a little bit further out in the last few slides. It's extremely important to me because modern medicine, we have communication via cell phone, we have it by computer, we have it with being able to treat people from a distance. And how do you know you're dealing with the correct person and that no one else is listening? So with the use of modern technology, it makes confidentiality for the patients a really big concern. And basically what we're trying to do at the end of the day is to maintain and preserve the patient's dignity so that their business isn't out all over the world and hasn't gone viral. And you know what I mean. HIPAA, which is, if you did not know what the acronym meant, you should. It's the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. It was signed into law in 1996, and it's a big, important thing. I mean, it regulates the privacy of patient health information. A little bit more about HIPAA, there are 5 major categories that are covered: insurance portability, administrative simplification, medical savings and tax deductions, health plan provisions, and revenue offset provisions. These are some of the 5 categories that are covered. Now, what is the privacy rule? It applies to any what we call PHI, protected health information. And pretty much it says that the minimum information may be disclosed in order to carry out medical treatment. You can't give the person who's calling a whole thorough history on the patient that they're treating because the person hasn't agreed to that. This is just the minimum. The patient has to grant disclosure by a written consent before any other treatment or payment or other healthcare operations can move forward. So you might say, okay, we got that. Who's affected? Well, these are the people who are affected by HIPAA and who have to adhere to the rules. Any public health authority, health care clearinghouses like the insurance companies, self-insured employers, private insurers, information systems vendors, various service organizations, and all universities. Those are the folks that are affected and have to follow all of the HIPAA rules. Excuse me, I'm thirsty. Okay. Moving on down. How does someone get denied a request for privacy? Well, in some cases, nursing homes will deny having the patient's files transferred to them, even if they'll sign for it, because they are trying to protect the patient. It doesn't sound like it makes sense, but it is something that does happen. Remember, the minimum can be disclosed, but not the maximum at any time. There is something called the state's preemption, which pretty much says that some of the states out there have a stricter policy than our HIPAA standards, and if that is the case, the state's law will take precedence over and there's standards that I'm just using providers. They have unique identifiers, that will reduce confusion and error based on what they're treating the patients for. It was published in 2002, and it uses the employer's ID number, which is the EIN, employer's identification number. So it doesn't really come out and say the name, it gives a number. That is their unique identifier. So, can public health information be de-identified? Yes. To de-identify a patient, if you want to go through a case and you want to just give the specifics, sometimes they'll say John Doe or Jane Doe. Patient's name would be removed. Any address or email information would be gone. Telephone fax numbers gone. All of the dates except for the year of the person's birth, admissions, discharge, and death. All of those can be given cannot be given except for the year of birth. So sometimes cases can be discussed for purposes of learning without doing those things. A little bit further into this, can public health information be de-identified? More things. Social security numbers cannot be given. Medical records numbers is another biggie. People can look that up. Any health care insurance numbers, that's another way to backtrack and find out who's who. License numbers, Department of Motor Vehicles can trace and see who that belongs to. Facial photos or any other identifying numbers or characteristics of the patient. So pretty much covers everything except the year they were born. So the obligations to the patient under HIPAA is to obtain their consent and authorization for any disclosure of medical information, and that will also allow the patient access to their own medical information. Remember, unless the physician, as we discussed last week, unless the physician feels that it's detrimental to the person if they have a mental incapacity and they can't handle what they're reading. Assuming that they can, they have to have access to their own information. However, it's always best to provide the minimum necessary standards. The general public who are non-medical do not tend to understand the medical mumbo-jumbo or the lingo that we all talk about, and it can be very frightening to them. That's not the purpose of what we do, why we do it. So what are the penalties for non-compliance? There are some civil penalties. There's a federal criminal liability with sanctions, which are fines, and time in prison. There's a risk of a class action suit and public relations data. Health integrity and protection data bank, which is a national data bank, collects reports and disclosure of actions taken. Now, I have to tell you, I won't give any names, but one of your classmates gave me a paper on a HIPAA violation from a healthcare professional. It was astoundingly good. I'm not going to give any names. I'm only going to say this. It was a case in California of a person who disclosed information on celebrities for cash. And $4,700 each disclosure, I guess. And she got caught and will have a penalty, but she also will have up to 10 years in prison. So if you want to look that one up, it's pretty cool. And I thought that was one of the best ones. I didn't know about that, and I generally have a heads up on some of these things. This one I didn't know about, and I thought, wow, that's crazy. It's kind of like a paparazzi, only not taking pictures, it's collecting data. It was a very, very, very good paper. And I urge you to take a look and see if you can see anything even like that. All right. moving along, the patient's right under the privacy standards. Patients have the right to a privacy notice. They have the right to see their own medical records, as we've just mentioned. They have the right to limit how their own health information is shared. They only may want one person in their family to have it and no one else. So you have to follow it. They have a right to get a thorough accounting to whom the information is given to, if it is given. Patients' rights under privacy standards continuing. They have the right to ask to be contacted in a special way, whether it's phone or email, and they'll give you guys will work out a way to identify who it is you're talking to, because you can't always tell who it is at the other end of the phone. They have the right to examine the health information provider's copy, and they can complain to a covered entity if there is a violation of privacy suspected. Covered entity would be someone who would do a thorough investigation of this questionable conduct. Defined permissions. The HIPAA defined permissions is permission to use information based on a reason for knowing or use. So you just can't go hunting around in patients' records just because you're bored or you have an interest. You might have known their nephew's goddaughter. No, it has to have a reason for you to be there, and it's going to be a good one. I think this is such a great class because we really, truly have covered and talked about in our discussion forum and in our work that you guys have been submitting. You see that this is super important. Now, there are some special rules relating to research. The researcher has to obtain patient authorization that will comply with HIPAA, and then they have to have also a waiver of authorization from the privacy board or an institutional review board. So it covers the person who's giving the information for research on them, and then the privacy board or the institutional review board signs a waiver of authorization saying, if you do something wrong, you can't come to us for help. The waiver has to include extensive documentation as required by HIPAA. You can imagine this is a lot of forms. Problems relating to HIPAA's privacy rules. Well, some healthcare providers can refuse to provide medical records to anyone except the patient. They don't want to get caught in doing something, even if they don't deem it to be incorrect. They don't want to be accused of doing something incorrectly. It's no longer just practicing medicine and that's it. It's just so many rules and laws. Compliance with HIPAA can also slow a police investigation or a prosecution of crimes. So that's something that we all have to deal with because the patient has the right to be protected. And you hope that eventually the truth will, of course, come out. Well, there are some misconceptions about HIPAA. We all know that. It does not prevent a hospital or physician from sharing information to treat the patient for what is wrong with them right now. Not the past, not the future, right now. Doesn't prevent disclosure to clergy. Someone is dying in an emergency room, and their priest comes in to see them. The doctor has the right to say they are not going to make it back, and please go give them the last rites. I mean, you can disclose to clergy. It will allow hospitals and physicians to share information with the spouse or anyone the patient has identified as involved in their care. It'll be written, it'll be signed, but if it's not signed that the husband can know what's happening with the wife, it doesn't happen. Personally, I can't give any names, of course, but I personally know of a case where a wife concealed that she had cancer. until 3 days before she died. It was very fast. Her husband had absolutely no idea there was anything wrong with her. 3 days before she went into a coma, and it was decided that her husband had the right to know that the clergy came into that she was dying, and it was a huge, huge shock to the husband that his wife was dying, and she didn't share anything with him. He was very, very upset that he didn't have the time to say goodbye. And you can understand that these things would all cause problems, but the patient ultimately has the right to do what they feel is best for them, whether we agree or not. Some other misconceptions about HIPAA are that it does not apply to most police or fire departments. They can release information about accident victims to people in the hospital that they're transferring their patients from their care into others' cares. Others' care. Doesn't mean that they can give it, to Joe Schmo on the street. It does, however, limit information an EMT may disclose. So, recommendations. In an institution where you're working, I don't care if it's an office, medical office, or it's a large hospital, there should be a privacy officer who is trained to conduct policy and procedure training every single year. It has to have internal assessments of existing policies and change when they need to be changed or updated. Agreements have to be signed with all non-employee service providers who bring things in. It has to adapt procedures for handling patients' requests quickly, and it has to implement notice of privacy practices. There are a few more. As I had said, the manuals have to be updated as fitting standards change. All employees mandatorily have to be trained on policies and procedures. Authorization of signatures and copies must be kept for 6 years. There has to be a list of sanctions for violations, and they must be implemented if there is a violation that does occur. It has to, and record it. It has to establish a complaint process for non-compliance, which does not get the person who is complaining into any difficulty or danger of losing their position at all. Now, there are some ethical concerns with information technology. We call it informatics now. It's no longer word of mouth or you to me or face-to-face. It now can be done over wireless area networks. We all know there are hackers out there. I wouldn't have the slightest idea how to do that. But medical informatics, the application, communication, and information of medical practice, research, and education. That's your definition, which you may see again. But the wireless network is one way that it can happen, and telemedicine is another way it can happen. As I had mentioned earlier, you can, a lot of ambulances now have a system where they can put equipment on the patient, and the information goes directly to a provider in the closest emergency room who will treat that patient via the phone or via the computer, and someone will go in and take care of what needs to be done. It's pretty interesting. So there are some ethical concerns, but that is pretty much it for this chapter in week 9, and I hope that you enjoyed this little archive. Please let me know.